Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 161 of the Simpa Life Podcast. Hope you're keeping well. Hope you've had a wonderful week. Hope you're appreciating, I know I'm about to say it for your bingo card, scratch it off, the warmer weather. It's only been 2 or 3 degrees warmer, but bloody hell, it makes a difference. It's also brighter days. I don't know if you notice. It's 4 o'clock in the UK right now, and it's bright outside. It'll be 5 o'clock in an hour, and it'll still be bright outside. There's plenty of things to complain about, but the weather isn't one of them. Yeah, a few things on the news today. I'm going to do a roundup at the end of this because we're doing a shorter sort of interview with today's guest. But there's one thing I wanted to raise at the top of the show, and that is the unfortunate passing of David Watson, aka Sam the Skunk Man, who tragically passed recently. Held by some to be a potentially controversial figure, it's undoubtable his contribution towards cannabis genetics, towards the cannabis industry, the cannabis culture. So yeah, wherever you are, have a smoke for David. All right, I say we're pressed for time, and that was a load of time, but you know me, guys, I love to talk shit. So let's move on quickly to introducing today's guest, who is a cannabis researcher, scientist, educator, and medical patient. They are the host of the Bioactive Podcast, co-founder of the non-profit, the Network for Applied Pharmacognosy. Been trying to practice that word. A member of the New Hampshire Cannabis Advisory Board, as well as an assistant adjunct professor at the University of Rhode Island. They are Dr. Riley Kirk, PhD. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me on the show. Great introduction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's pharmacognosy. I know we'll get onto it soon. I had to go away and Google that. I'm not going to lie. I like to think of myself as an educated man, but I read it and went, that's a typo. And then looked at it and went, oh, no, there's a whole thing I don't understand here. So you've sent me on some rabbit holes there, so thank you. And I think we'll,
It's a fun rabbit hole, though.
oh,
Pharmacognosy, yeah, it just means really natural product research. And actually, the word breaks down into like pharma, medicine, and cognosy, or the knowledge of, because before we had our modern pharmaceutical industry, all we had was plants and fungi as medicine. So it's like the OG medicine, and it's what my graduate degree is in. And that word was like actively dying because nobody knew how to say it. And they were just like, oh, let's just like vaporize it. And we were like, no, 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 no. Let's just teach people about it. And then maybe people will start to incorporate it more. So we very purposely put that into the name of our nonprofit to try to bring more attention to this word and this really important study of natural medicines.
100%, 100%. I think the word itself, it is the intersection between two very established and often what are now becoming binary entities in our society. And if I was wearing my little tinfoil hat, I would say it's loss of use in common parlance, and the knowledge of it is because it's become esoteric, because it's necessary to keep the pharmaceutical industry, behind this magic mirrors and smoke and white coats and science that we can't possibly understand. So yeah, it's I appreciate your work. I really do that you border two spaces that often have separate audiences. So to
And just
create
so people know, too, still a lot of modern pharmaceuticals are discovered from natural products. And then, of course, they're changed to be either more safe, more bioavailable, or, of course, more patentable. But it really does start with nature because nature is the best organic chemist in the world. And nature's doing things that we are never going to be able to do in a laboratory.
100%, 100%. I mean, it's an interesting one as the technology continues to accelerate, and we've now got, these mass information models that are then working on, well, if this from this subspecies of this genus does this, that's got a similar chemical, and they're going off and doing the theoretical work of scouring all of these huge non-related data sets and coming up with some really novel ideas. But what I find quite ironic is they often mirror traditional practice within cultures that were destroyed through either colonization or globalization or whatever other sort of Asians that was Asians people, not Asians, that have gone around the world and destroyed things.
Hmm.
So it's a great field that I do hope more attention is drawn to. Yeah, let's for people that don't know your work, obviously I'm going to include all links and everything below to get people introduced and caught up. But let's start at the beginning, I guess. This is the kind of the cliched question I ask most of my guests that are involved in the field, and that is when and how did you first get involved with cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, I started smoking weed at about 14 years old. Yeah, I had two older brothers, and they were kind of my stoner mentors. And my parents were really chill about weed because they saw that it made us get along better with each other and with them. It calmed us down. It was keeping us out of trouble with other substances, with other drugs, with alcohol. So they were actually really chill with kind of creating a safe space. They weren't like giving us weed, but they knew we consumed cannabis. Um, I've always had like a very hyperactive brain. That could mean ADHD, but also means seizures. I've had seizures in the past, and I'm very in touch with my body, and like I know when my brain is hyperactive. And consuming cannabis just like leveled out my brain in a way that I've never felt before. So it made me feel normal, it made me feel functional, and it just made me feel much more at ease. So really, since consuming cannabis in high school, I've been, quote, stoner ever since. I've been consuming almost every day since that time. And I consume many different methods. I smoke, I vape, I dab, I sometimes take edibles, but that's my least favorite consumption method personally.
Mhm.
But then I went to biomedical. Well, I went to college, studied biomedical science. I was like, oh, don't want to go into healthcare. But then I really loved the sciences, and I didn't know that there was a field of studying natural medicines in kind of a professional way. I was really obsessed with herbalism, and I was always collecting fungi and plants and extracting them and making teas and tinctures. But this was just like on the side. I was still working in biotech, but I was just doing all of this fun stuff on the side. And then I learned about this word pharmacognosy, which is the study of natural medicines, but within the scope of like the modern pharmaceutical industry, like studying it with a lot more rigor and understanding biochemical pathways and understanding how to discover new molecules. And that was just like, when I learned about that word, I became obsessed. I immediately knew I was like, I need to learn more about this. Went to graduate school. I studied hundreds of different medicinal plants. I studied cyanobacteria, diatoms, algae, like all of these different forms of life and the chemistry they made. But the school, towards the end, was starting to release a cannabis program. And I'm a very loud, open stoner. I don't hide my consumption. Like, I'm very loud and proud. I mean, look at my pants. They have weed leaves all over them. I'm always dressed in, weed stuff. And I'm just proud of it because I really believe you can be a high functioning cannabis consumer and it doesn't affect your intellectual ability or social ability for some people. And I'm one of those people, I feel like. So when they released this program, they were looking for a teaching assistant. And immediately they're like, oh, well, Riley should be the teaching assistant. Like she's the only one who knows about weed to this degree. So during that, while that program was being released, I was creating short form videos and long form videos teaching people about cannabis, the endocannabinoid system, all of these different components of how cannabis works in the body. And it was being received so well that eventually I started to make short form content on TikTok and then eventually Instagram. And just the response of people being like, I've never seen this before. I didn't know about the endocannabinoid system. I didn't know about any of this, of how cannabis worked in the body. And just seeing people like, feel so validated that there was science behind the way that they feel and behind their favorite plant. It just like the comments just changed my life. Like I learned so much from this community and the feedback was just so amazing that I continued to create that content. And eventually that led me to a job in the cannabis industry and then eventually led me to creating this nonprofit that myself and Dr. Miyabi Shields co-founded called the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, where our goal is to kind of combine that amazing community knowledge that's kind of just locked within people who are cannabis consumers and combining that with rigorous biochemical data so we can get kind of a better, more nuanced approach of cannabis medicine because we know academia isn't really getting the whole picture, but the cannabis industry is also not really getting the whole picture. So we wanted a way to kind of create a gray area where we can validate people's voices, but also educate and provide destigmatization through traditional research methods.
Some awesome, and I think you're doing quite a good job at it in terms of you're walking quite a line of censorship with current platforms, especially Meta and YouTube. But I think you're reaching a good audience, and like you say, it's knowledge that a lot of people, well, the people that will hear it, most will keep it, but few will then really understand sort of, oh my God, and get the revelation of what that kind of means. And like I said, the validation, the justification for we still term, I guess, in this country, drug-seeking behavior. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? That it's not a sin, it's not immoral, it's not unnatural. I'm seeking to exogenously provide something that endogenously I have a deficit in because of, and again, there's many contentious reasons of that, lack of dietary things or environmental factors, plastics, etc. Um, yeah, it's like you said, it's taken out of the sphere of motivation from profit that the industry, pharmaceutical industry, the cannabis industry, whatever, they will know a certain knowledge that they need to know. But there's an Upton Sinclair quote, who was a writer in England many years ago, and his quote is, "You cannot expect a man to understand something when his salary is contingent on him not understanding."
Wow, that's
Uh,
powerful.
it's exactly where we're at. So someone like yourself creating a non-profit immediately takes part of that out of the way, and that your motivation is to provide the education, obviously by a means of being able to pay your bills and live, but it not being the primary motivator allows for a greater inquisitive approach to it that isn't biased by, well, no, I need to make money at the end of this, so this either has to be dangerous in the realm of the DEA because we need funding, or this needs to be the best medicine in the world ever because we're a pharmaceutical company about to launch on the stock market or whatever. And yeah, it's people like yourself that, from lived and living experience, as we always champion on this podcast, providing and seeking that knowledge and putting into the academic realm while still proudly being who you are. There are so many people that, I used to take drugs and now I study them. It's like, yeah, I know you still take drugs. Don't lie to me. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, you're so right. And there is so much guilt too. I mean, with specifically being a daily consumer of cannabis, like people feel really guilty being dependent on this medicine. And, I always compare it to people on, SSRIs, antidepressants. Like, we don't give the same guilt to people taking those medicines every day because that's just what we've been trained is like, the normal medicine to take. And
Mm.
we're trying to change the narrative there and be like, a lot of people rely on this medicine every day as finding their new norm. But something that we've been missing in academic research for so long is this component of trust because, most research in academia is funded through the government, at least in the United States. I don't really know how every other country works. And, obviously the government has been the main issue with access and federal legalization of this plant. So when the government releases a survey or a study and they're asking people, "Hey, how many times do you consume? What products do you consume? How do you like all of these questions?" People aren't going to be honest or people just don't want to participate in it because, that is the evil entity that's inhibiting us from getting access in the first place. So for us, being researchers and also like lighting up all the time when we're at events, we're always smoking with people, we're always building that line of trust, we're always making sure people know it's not us versus you, it's just us, like we're studying us because we feel the need to further understand our community. And that's been again like the most impactful thing is understanding how we can leverage that trust and also even after we get the data, maintain that trust because
Mhm.
everybody's like, "Wow, you guys have so much data. Who are you going to sell it to?" And I'm like, "Nobody. We're not going to sell this data." And I know that's a bad financial move, but at the same time, like we have so much sensitive data about cannabis and pregnancy, cannabis and driving, all of these different subjects. We're not going to, break that trust immediately just because someone offers us $10,000 for that data because we don't know how that's going to be misconstrued, whether it's a publication, a news article, whatever it is. We don't want the data we collect to be in the wrong person's hands and the whole narrative to be changed because they have access to that data.
Yeah, yeah, it's like you said, it's the what is it in quantum physics? The double slit experiment. The nature of
Yeah.
observation changes the way that reacts, or like in the criminology sense of it, the panopticon, the 360 prism, the idea of the cells facing a single guard, but the way that the cells were built means that the cells wouldn't know when they were being observed. And since then, the concept of then it's what was birthed, like social control, the idea of policing and how we do a lot of things. So there are these different elements to it that, unless you have that fundamental trust, and it can only be built on, like you said, active participation and seeing that, wait, I've given you the thing that you can destroy me for, you didn't destroy me.
Yeah.
It's literally building that trust. As you said, it's mama government, it's the progenitor of prohibition going, Oh, drugs are illegal. If you find out about them, we're throwing you in a prison cell. Could you tell us about your drug use? Like
Yeah. Do you
you would
mind
ne who
taking your
would
time?
yeah, who would ever do this? It's irrational. And then they use that skewed data because of the nature of the way it's taken to then justify their pre-established beliefs or
Hmm.
I don't even know if they're beliefs anymore. They're just prejudices, old-fashioned prejudices. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
we're seeing this melting and we in the UK at the minute, it's mental. People of the UK, go Google, do an experiment. Google two things: cannabis news, medical cannabis news. Look at the two difference you see is insane. Story after story of hundreds of plants raided here, criminal gang here, man in court, foreign nationals deported, all this, and then medical cannabis. Oh, children saved by da da da. Or miracle drug, new money on stock market. Da, da. And they hold these things both to be true, and they can't seem to get it together. And it's again where I think the work of people like yourself that are instead of being forced to stay on the island of consumer, are risking putting their head above the parapet to go, "Well, there's other land out there," and the others in our tribe are kind of going, "Yeah, but there's water, there's sharks in them water," and that knowledge base, to continue my analogy, it's quite a visual one, is to build a raft that will get us from shore to shore in the
Hmm.
hopes of building a bridge because they have resources we don't. We have resources they don't. The industry is starting to fail and get in trouble in a lot of places. Again, elections coming up in like what, 4 weeks in Germany? Might reverse legalization there. Canada. Woo! There's some very interesting conversations being had under the table at the minute with their new conservative government coming in November.
Yeah.
Nothing is permanent that we have, and if we rest on the little victories that we get, we don't get the foundational information to affect global policy change. Which, until
Hmm.
we get to the UN and start to bother those kind of folks, it doesn't matter what we do nationally. It kind of doesn't. It does for the people in the immediate area. Don't get me wrong, it's not what I'm saying, but that collectivism and that can only come through compassionate, connected people. That is the people you're building the trust of. People like yourself building the data, and then us finding a way to work with the authorities to go. Do you not want a better society? Do you not want happier, more productive humans? You can even make more money off them. They'll be more productive in a capitalist sense, but they'll have
Hmm.
better lives. We'll have better communities. We'll see each other as allies, potential friends, rather than potential enemies going, are you going to cut grass on me because of the way I smell? Like I got to be
Well,
worried that I've got red eye, that kind of crap.
and these communities exist no matter what the political situation is, and it's very irresponsible to just think that we don't exist because we've never given a platform for us to exist, you know? Like our data's skewed too, and we're the first
Yeah.
to say that because we resonate most with stoners, with people who are loud and proud and also want to share their experience because it's never been asked. It's like
Mm.
this group of people has never been documented in peer review and literature, like daily consumers. We have a survey data with about 5,000 people, and 91% of people are daily cannabis consumers. Like, yes, that's skewed, but at the same time, the reason that we've never had this data is because we've never had the ability for somebody to collect that data and have that trust. So, just as you said, like the government data is skewed, our data is skewed too, but at the same time, like that's still 5,000 people who are real, who are like trying to give their opinion and their perspective, and it should be listened to. Like we need to listen to these people and say, okay, almost nobody's having adverse effects. Almost everybody has increased quality of life. People are taking less pharmaceuticals. People are trying to get off opiates. People are trying to consume less alcohol, and it's working. So, like, let's study this because in the other populations of people, nothing's working for them getting off of opiates and reducing alcohol consumption, except for this unique cohort of cannabis consumers. So, let's look into it more as long as we can change the lens from being drug addicts instead to being just cannabis consumers who are benefiting from this plant.
100%. I mean, if it wasn't for the past century of prohibition and everything that has happened, it would just be people using a plant in the same way that we would then study a cohort of people, I don't know, using rosemary oil on their skin and hair.
Drinking tea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It would just be there is a subsect of people that we can draw together in these boundaries and then study that for usage to understand. Because again, when you look at it, I describe cannabis consumers in the UK as the largest unrepresented demographic.
Love
We're,
that.
we're millions strong, and we are everybody. We are all ages, all groups, all classes, all backgrounds, all colors, all shapes and sizes. There is no other little box you could put us in other than these people consume cannabis. It's a big bloody tent. And like you said, and I think that's a brilliant point to bring up about the skewing of data, that the only way we can unskew that data or see it through a rational lens is through a compromise being made where there isn't a bias going into it. And that's difficult, we say, is, but I love weed. We know the truth and we stand on our side. And then they're going, well, it's the worst thing ever. It's the devil's lettuce. It poisons you. And we have personal truth, but we also have discernible fact and reality. And we have to find a way to respect the boundaries of these things while then using that reality of science to inform policy.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise we have these major problems. Like you said, if they're funding all of this stuff towards, I mean, in the UK and Europe, we're trying to move away from opioids. We've looked at what has happened with various things over in the States, especially like the Sacklers and Purdue
Oh
Pharmaceuticals and
my God.
OxyContin was like, wow. And so Europe and our opioid organizations and chronic pain management groups are now going, opioids, no, no, we need to war. But they're like going la 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 to cannabinoids because their studies, they don't understand cannabis. I'm trying to think. I had a guest on years ago when we had this conversation, and it was kind of a revelation to them. Of You've got to understand that the cannabis for pain isn't the same as opioid. An opioid is like, here's your nerve, and you cut it in half. It doesn't know. You have no clue. Cannabinoids turn that dial from 11 down to 1 or 2, and then when you go,
Mm-hmm.
ow, it still hurts when I walk. Yeah, you broke your ankle, mate.
Yeah, it's gonna
Like
hurt.
yes,
And a little bit of
pain is
pain
a
is
signal.
necessary for that
100.
feedback mechanism. So you know not to walk on your fucking foot. Like that is
100.
what pain is for in the brain. But chronic pain's a little different. But I think with some of the most impactful data with cannabis and opioids too, is that even if you're still taking opioids, the dose required is like 10 times lower if you add in cannabinoids. And
Mhm.
now the harm reduction is insane because now you have such less likely of a chance of getting addicted to that substance because you can take the opioids at like sub-threshold doses, add in cannabinoids, and now you have a great, pain reduction mechanism while not potentially abusing opioids. So,
You
you
can
know,
you can take the break as well. I mean, the one of the things that we understand, but we don't understand in that Upton Sinclair kind of thing that we were talking about before. Chronic opioid use increases pain receptors' interpretation of signaling. So you could
yes.
start with oh, I had an injury when I got in college in a car accident, take opioids for 6 months, and have basically wired your system to be like, "Argh." The only thing that isn't what feels like not pain is being on opioids. And then
Yeah.
as soon as I'm not at my peak dose, problem. And it takes a lot of effort to step away from that to understand what that is. And cannabis can be a wonderful crutch to take somebody from going through a sweaty rattle of like, no, if I don't get it in the next half an hour, someone's in trouble, to being able to manage those periods and take those tolerance breaks. And like you said, at a much lower dosage as well in terms of compounding effects in people. We still
Mm-hmm.
don't, we talk about metabolites and all the rest of it. And you're like, here's the standardized mean person from the study. That's what we've built the dosage around. This guy could be 300 pounds heavier. That guy could be 200 pounds lighter than the average person. Or there's still so much that they have the illusion of saying standardization. And that lie is what they're using to negate cannabis as a as a herbalist medication in that sense, a self-driven medicinal plant, because they're like, no, 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 the compounds are medical. They have medical value. We just
Mm.
need to figure out how to deliver those compounds. And so it's the same thing of they still shit on and are not with nobody smokes opium anymore. Like, but that's the most benign way of to then have a cultural avenue to it. But they Bayer created diamorphine, heroin is the brand name, and released
Mm-hmm.
it in like 1898. That fell out of favor with them, and now it's smack. It's all these horrible derivative terms and the way they describe people. Yet still in most settings, and I mean we're starting to move on to things like ketamine and that in hospitals, but you'll get diamorphine, you'll get oromorph and these kind of derivative drugs, but then oh no, I'm a patient. And the
Mm-hmm.
binary that creates, I am scared of that's where we're going to go. The harder we medicalize or medicinalize, well, it's medicalize in that sense, as in turn into the institutions of pharmacology, etc. Cannabis and cannabinoids, it creates this binary where then the people that don't fit into our paradigm, they must be bad and must be druggies. And I just see this acceleration of because of the profit margin motives. And this is where, again, like that grassroots of the culture science, lived and living science, to coin a phrase, I guess, is so valuable. Yes, there are skewed elements to it, but it doesn't make it any less valuable when, as we've just discussed, their data is skewed by their preposition as well.
Yes, and I don't know how medical school is in the UK, but at least in the US, physicians aren't taught about the endocannabinoid system. They're not taught about any real value of cannabis other than it causes harm and addiction, which is just not true. But, really to make change in the medical system, we need a top-down approach. We need to be educating our physicians and our nurses and our PAs and all of these different people so that they're not contributing to the stigma further.
Mhm.
And, I think that's something we're passionate about through the nonprofit because you mentioned censorship in the beginning, and that's a huge issue of getting out education because, a lot of cannabis consumers who are interested in this are seeking it. They are typing in things to YouTube or to these other learning platforms, and they're watching hours and hours of education on their own. Then when they go to their physician and they say, hey, I think this product will work because blah, 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 blah. They often know more than their physician about this plant, and physicians don't like that. They don't like feeling stupid and feeling less than, but it is the case most of the time. And, to make real change, I think we really need to get physicians on board to really appreciate this medicine for what it is. And I've heard so many physicians be like, oh, we just don't have enough research. Well, have you read the fucking 30,000 papers we do have about cannabis and the ECS? Because if you haven't, then you shouldn't be talking like that. We have so much research. It's one of the most researched plants in the world. And not just that, we have millions and millions and millions of consumers who are benefiting from this plant every single day. If that's not enough data for you, I don't know what you're looking for.
100%, 100%. It's so true. It's something I always bring up on the podcast is the fact that, yeah, it is the most studied plant. We know all the things, but it's something I always try to remind people in this conversation is it's going to sound like an odd comparison, but it does make sense. The FDA in America, in order to get a pharmaceutical drug passed, you need two positive studies. You can have 20,000 negative studies,
Hmm.
but your two positive studies get you approval. I think that is what is happening. They're going, oh, what do you mean that's 45,622 studies and it still says it's good? Fuck. Next study, more money, more money. It's so weird that we're caught up in this paradigm. It's in my ideal world, and yeah, maybe I'm a little bit, socialist or whatever. I can't help but feel like the industry should contribute through a tax to the funding of an educational scheme for physicians. Because I can't remember where I heard this, but it's something like within 5 years of leaving medical training, 70% of what you've learned is already out of date.
Yes.
And
Yep.
then you get your companies or whatever pay for you to go and up, and this is why you end up with specialization because then you
Yep.
can only keep your head down, going, "Oh crap, I've got to read these 10,000 papers. Give me more papers, more papers, more conferences, more things." We need that lobby, not to create the industry for money. Money will come if we get the foundation right. We'll build to the heavens, and everybody will eat. But if we don't get the foundations right, they'll keep building these rickety things that might look good, but as soon as a breeze comes along with the weather changes, it collapses. It's so invaluable that yeah, I think we have to self-fund. We have to if we're going to produce our own science. I think yeah, we have to self-fund, self-lobby for yes, legal change, but giving them the data to go, well, here's exactly why. It's not even that it's the right thing to do, or it's immoral to criminalize people for sinning different than you sin, or all the other multitude of reasons. Here is hard science that says you're wrong, but also here's science that shows how much better society could be. Because we understand that reintegrating all of these people, I always make the argument of imagine the arts, music, film, TV, if we still criminalized homosexuality.
Oh my gosh. It
How
wouldn't
terrible!
exist.
How terrible! But the shit that would be. Oh my God!
Oh, I
Imagine so.
know.
Then imagine now society with all of the creativity, the wonderful, multifaceted nature of the cannabis consuming populace was brought back into that fold. What
Hmm.
society could look like, the innovations, the revelations, the moving forward with all these different things that we could have. We could advance in a decade, more than a century.
And there would be less violence and a lot, less other negative things too. And, I agree that our industry should be funding some of these things. And I think it would be possible if they already weren't paying like 30%
Yeah,
taxes egregiously on things that they should not be,
100%.
paying. And if we could reduce those or eliminate those taxes, then we would be able to self-fund these studies, and get more data on that. But, even some of the studies for medical claims, nobody in the cannabis industry wants to fund because you can't even advertise that if you do get amazing data because you're not allowed to make claims about cannabis because it's, not within the FDA's regulations, and you'll get shut down if you say this helps with pain.
Mhm.
So there's so many obstacles, and like I never blame the industry. Our nonprofit's actually mostly funded through the industry. We've had so much support through the industry, but everybody's struggling, at least in the US, because the infrastructure's not set up to have successful cannabis companies. The infrastructure is set up to essentially have a few really large companies that pay an insane amount in taxes. And if you're not one of those, you're just going to be scraping by like every single month. It's a struggle for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it leads on to one of the questions I wanted to ask you because I can see it interrelated. The controversy with the DEA and the rescheduling, descheduling. I've been advocating for many years for the descheduling of all drugs. I
Same.
think the only way to do it is to remove them from the criminal schedules that we have, go back retrospectively, rip up the 88, 61, 71 UN conventions, and have a rational, scientific, evidence-based conversation about what the hell these things are. And if we don't like them, educate. People don't drink bleach. We don't need to put on the side of bleach, don't drink bleach, because people know not to drink bleach. But
Your
the
body
people,
knows not to drink
yeah,
bleach when you smell it.
yeah, so the point is we know not to consume poisons, but then you talk about people want to take MDMA or whatever. Yes, they can then have adulterants and toxins and whatever. So then your job surely should be to make sure that they are then safe. Like the rationale is all backwards. But then there's obviously what's come out back end of last year, because obviously we're 2025 now, was the DEA very biased. I wonder why. I think 90 something percent of their funding still comes from for cannabis and for wild eradication programs. There's a funny image that I always like to bring up when discussing this to people of when they realize that cannabis can literally lay dormant in the ground for like 20 years. She's a diatomaceous self-sexing plant, so she'll go, oh, let's, bit of pollen, bit of seed, drop in the ground. DEA turn up and go, who's planted all this goddamn cannabis here? Da, da, da. Destroys it all, comes back 10 years later and goes, who the hell's planted all that? And they're destroying literally millions of plants. You can look it up. The amount they destroy is disproportionately wild, clandestine cannabis. And it's because it's in Jamestown was founded when the Brits went over. It was law to plant it and grow it. So
Hmm.
it's become naturalized. It's become an heirloom race within the space of America across the whole of the 50 states. Well, except maybe Hawaii, but that's a different sort of history for a different
Yeah.
a different day.
Mhm.
But my point being that they need that argument that cannabis is bad. They have to do it to keep the funding of this. The DEA are instrumental in controlling the lack of, oh sorry, restraining interstate trade. They are the kingmaker, as it were, put in place by a federal government to ensure that no people can get large. It's almost, I always use the analogy of saying that it's kind of like, what was it? Was it Maze Runner or Hunger Games? One of those teenage kind of rebellion movies. And they're putting all the different groups, Hunger Games, like they put the different groups together and just seeing how different models work. Because when we look at air quotes legalization in the States, very different models across all of them. And it feels like to me it's an experiment to see, well, which model do we prefer? Is it California and high tax? Is it over here in a bit more like Oregon and everybody gets a go? Is it going to be Florida and like medical only, but you can kind of fudge it? Or is it going to be over here in New York and this and that? And you're just seeing all these paradigms play out. And I think the DEA overplayed their hand in trying to go, no, we'll get this in, have the reschedule, and we'll move it all to medical. And it would have just reset so much of it. And like you said, only the big boys that would have been schmoozing and drinking champagne with the pharmaceutical companies would have been invited over. And I still feel that's where they're going. And this is where descheduling, decriminalization of all cannabis related offenses, to me is the golden ticket for the community, for humans in general. That all that tax structure, all the bullshit, all their acts and statutes wouldn't then apply to this because it'd be like Colorado in the early days. And it'd be like, oh, mate, that's a nice t-shirt you got there. How much is it? Oh, it's 200 quid. Oh, is it 200 quid? Oh, there's an ounce. Oh, okay. A pack of skins. I'll give you $300 for that pack of skins. Yeah. What I mean? There's
Mhm.
means and ways that we can use their language, their legalese, their systems to then liberate ourselves, but it requires the liberation of, well, it is ultimately us from the law, not the plant, because the plant can't be put in court. But we
Right.
we have to like through then, like I said, science, collective movements, and now hopefully the realization of a lot of the entrepreneurs that have killed themselves, gone millions into debt, ripped their hair out to try and make it work, air quotes, legitimately. Like there needs to be another movement. We've seen kind of amongst us who was trying to make money from us and profiteer from the perpetuation of the suffering of others. Now it's time, I think, re-conglomerate together because, like you said, we're seeing the sorts of people that will fund like Last Prisoner projects like you yourself
Yeah.
that are drawing attention to the, yes, you're making money up there and tax and all good. These people still suffering, and the more you succeed, the more you take resources away from us to help those damn people.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Last year, the government announced that they might reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, and everyone's like, "Yay!" They never did anything. That never went through. They never even met about it. They keep just pushing back that hearing back and back and back and back. And who knows with this new administration what is going to happen. I mean, I'm definitely pro descheduling as well, but I think you brought up the most important point. It's not about science at all. Like, it's not about research. It's not about what's best for humanity. It's not about harm reduction. It's about three massive industries: the pharmaceutical industry, the tobacco industry, and the alcohol industry. And they rule our government, like fully rule our government. And until we see change at that level, like I don't know what could possibly change because they have more power than like the president. Those three industries are insanely powerful in the United States, and they're also really, really, really scary to combat. I mean, I don't know if you know like raw rolling papers, but they're the only paper company like owned by the cannabis industry. All the other paper companies are owned by the tobacco industry. And he has been robbed, he's been bullied, he's been death threats, like the things that he has experienced from being the only competitor in the cannabis industry is just a little microscopic thing about what's going on with, you know, these big players. And they have all the money and resources and power that they can imagine, and it's working. Like they're playing us like puppets. And unfortunately, you know, we're gonna need a pretty big movement in order to play against them. And I think the momentum's there. I think more and more people are waking up, especially, you know, older people are finally like that reefer madness era of people are finally like, oh, well, I can't sleep and I have chronic pain and nothing else is working. Oh, wait, this gummy is helping me sleep. And that's starting to change their mind about cannabis. And as they get on board and as the more educated younger generations come forward who weren't exposed to as much propaganda, the people are gaining more and more power. And, you know, it's only an amount of time before we're going to have a vast majority of people that are fighting against this, even if it's from just being renegade by just growing and just by smoking publicly and just by, you know, doing the kind of grassroots things that can be dangerous, but in huge numbers, it's less dangerous. But you do need power of the people to kind of come together and be that renegade. But again, it's scary for a lot of people. Like I can be loud and proud and I am always at the state house advocating, but I also wouldn't expect my friends who are nurses and EMTs and have these more sensitive jobs. I don't really expect them to show up and be like, I grow weed illegally. You know, that's just not in the cards for them because they could lose a lot more than someone like me could lose who's in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's where sort of dynamic activism works really well in terms of you make the difference where you can, you do your little bit where you are. So that's somebody's quote, and I can't think who the hell it is. It's somebody's quote from history anyway. And so yeah, so but they can advocate by talking to their patients. They can advocate by in the boardrooms that they're in, going, "Oh, well, this I happen to have read this study. Has anybody looked at this study? This is interesting. This was on the news." There's a multitude of ways we can all contribute towards, you know, forging that pathway towards the future we want to build and live in.
Especially
And,
with
and
small government versus big government. Like always show up to your small government meetings. Because as you just said, like if you can bring evidence, like one time I was at a courthouse meeting like about a new cannabis bill. And it was about being able to grow outdoor and grow in greenhouses because currently in the state we only had indoor grows. And everybody's like, well, there's no reason why we need outdoor. And I was like, actually, there's a really great publication from Columbia University that shows that outdoor plants produce unique chemistry and therefore unique pharmacology and would produce, something that is beneficial to a lot of medical patients. And they're all like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like this is a published peer review study. And they're all like, can you send it to me? Of course I can. And just right then, I just sent it to everyone. And then they just like, their mind was like blown that we had this type of research. And again, like, they don't know. Like, somebody needs to be there to shove that research in their face and say, we have this research, but nothing like you just don't have the means to like maybe not the time either to do all that research because legislators are very, very busy, so we do need to have people showing up and just keep shoving it in their face.
Yeah, until the day the ones that do smoke cannabis do publicly on those boards, yeah, we need to be on the other side of the pulpit, wringing their necks, metaphorically speaking, and
Hmm.
holding them to account because, as you say, they've just got the blinders on. They can't see what they can't see because they don't know it. It's interesting you referenced again the big three. Again, they've spent a century selling poisons and being the profitable that they have. They must be salivating at the idea of selling something like cannabis, like and being the ones in charge of it. I mean, an interesting company to watch about the synergy of these kind of industries is Tilray. Tilray does a lot of interesting shit. When Canada stock market crashed because it was like a pump and dump from various international investors, as in the cannabis stock market, or cannabis companies on the stock market to be more precise, several of them had to diversify into a multitude of things. Aurora went into the craft flower business and started to convert a lot of its infrastructure towards craft flowers. Tilray started buying up intellectual property in America and in Canada, and part of this was to get a foothold into American business because international companies can't own national companies in America in the cannabis space. And they've recently done some deals with Coors, and they bought several of their smaller brands, and they are actually now the largest craft beer producer in Colorado.
Wow.
So they're starting to find other ways to take strangleholds of certain markets because if you look at the patents as well out of these companies, the future of cannabis, as far as they're concerned, isn't combustibles. The
No.
future of cannabis is drinking, it is eating, it is incorporating into their infrastructure. If you look at Philip Morris and British American Tobacco, I think British American Tobacco released a very interesting paper that kind of raised some eyebrows a couple of years ago, and they were talking about the future of their industry in quite veiled language of a new generation of consumables, and they were removing combustible and talking about different like smokeless future and this and that. And obviously they're invested in several vape companies that are not necessarily successful when you look at your Juuls or your other big companies like that, but they are holding market. They have the ear, like you said, of the parliamentarians, of the policymakers, of the money men. And it just feels like we're just waiting to get in the hands. And once they've touched around the other side of the earth and they're like, oh, are we ready, boys? You ready? There'll be this
Hmm.
flurry of activity and of legislative change, and it'll be celebrated in the media, and they'll frame it in such a way that, unfortunately, the majority naive within our community will go as they did with Schedule 3, go, this is brilliant. And it wasn't until the companies came out and went, states' rights, how the hell is this going to work? If it suddenly becomes Schedule 3 in a pharmaceutical drug, I'm not a licensed pharmacist.
Hmm.
What is what of my infrastructure, my investment? What about that it started to kick in? People went, but then there's still so many of us that are just sat going, that frank, I'm not saying they've ridden on the coattails because they belong to be here because we're fighting for them, but have just kind of sat looking back at the distance we've covered and not the struggle that we've gone through. That are going, oh, you'll get there eventually. It doesn't matter. That's just it's a good step along the way. It's a positive step in the right direction, as they say. And we've seen
Oh
enough
yeah.
of those positive steps sidestep where we want to be. And again, like you said, a valid point, which I really want to reiterate, especially what's going on in my current life, because I'm half reveal this because I'm not putting it fully in the public arena. I'm in a bit of a conflict with my county council. I've since 2017 taken over a bit of land in the city, and we've run cannabis events there and kept it up, the maintenance there for nearly a decade. And our council have suddenly come along and been like, "It's a nice bit of land you got there." So, yeah, local institutions and activity there within is very important, people. They are the people you live next to. You bump into them in the supermarket, you drive on the same roads as them, they live in your community. If you can reach them and get them beyond their ignorance and their bigotry, granted, some people are beyond reproach or reach, it's still worth trying. And yeah, like you said, if taking this information and this data to the eyes of people, it might not necessarily change legislations or change laws, but if you can change the minds of the lawmakers, we start to get somewhere that when a conversation is had, it's not just, oh, hello, Mr. Big Tobacco, you come in. Hello, Mr. Big Alcohol, you come in. Mr. Pharmaceutical, how you doing? Like, it's, oh, community group A, community group B. Oh, it's the stakeholders of this. Oh, it's the consumers of this. It's, we'd have a voice within that space. So I hope
And
people. Sorry, go on.
it's important for people to know too, like as you're saying, their fingers are already in everything. Like, do you know who funded the discovery of the cannabinoid 1 receptor? Pfizer. Like they have been in the game the entire time. There's already been synthetic cannabinoids that are currently being researched for so many different conditions. We aren't getting rid of big pharma. We're not getting rid of big tobacco. We're not getting rid of big alcohol. But I do think as Schedule 3 approaches, especially being a natural product chemist, this is something I think about a lot because, I discussed in the beginning how it's always about patenting. And I think where we need to stand our ground as the cannabis industry is having flower, having rosin, having hash, having complex medicines. You can't patent a natural product. So let's stay natural. The government, the pharmaceutical industry always wants to change shit and for the ability to patent it. Let them do that. They're going to do that. They're going to isolate compounds. They're going to change them in a way. They're going to put them in a pill. And that's honestly where I think a lot of like hospitals are going to utilize cannabis medicine. That is inevitable. It's going to
Mm.
happen. But the industry can still survive if we're focused on the plant. We need to continue to be advocates for the plant and have a voice for the plant so that you can let them do that. But our medicine can't be patented. It doesn't belong in the pharmaceutical industry. We don't have complex natural products as part of the pharmaceutical industry. So let's keep it that way. But we need to stand our ground that way. And I do think it's okay to have better manufacturing practices in the industry that are maybe a little more in line with the pharmaceutical industry, but are still maintaining the plant's profile, the complex natural chemistry of the plant. And I do think like drinkables, consumables, they are going to be a thing. They already are. You see people, cracking those cans all the time. And I do think that's okay. I think it's a good part of the industry, especially for people trying to drink less alcohol. Like it's a great way to socialize and consume without having to consume alcohol. But we just need to have our eyes open and be like, okay, who owns that company? Because as you're saying, like we see alcohol sales plummeting in the United States and we see cannabis sales increasing quite a bit. Every big industry sees that and everybody wants a piece of it. So just making sure, you're still supporting your craft growers, still supporting your local industries. And if you continue to do that, like you're doing your job. Those other industries are still going to flourish. They're still going to do great. They have the best lawyers, they have the best marketing on the planet. That's still going to happen, but you can still do your job by just being an educated consumer and using the plant and focusing on your local companies that you want to continue to thrive and survive.
100%. This is the thing they forget is we could bake a pie big enough that we all eat, but
Yeah,
they're trying to kick us out the kitchen because they think there's only enough ingredients for theirs.
exactly.
They don't see the scope and understanding of it. That again, it's they see a world of, well, no licensing. You've got an alcohol license. You can't have cannabis where there's alcohol. And it's like, no, the perfect vision. If you want community cohesion, what we're actually seeing, like I said, is it's not even necessarily people going teetotal. It's people that their only vice was alcohol. They're going, "Wait, I can have a smoke as well. I'll have 2 pints tonight and a cup, a good bag of Kush." Instead of going, all right, 20 pints with a I don't know if you guys drink pints, bottles, whatever the
We
American
do.
equivalent. Yeah. However you choose to contribute. But you know what I mean? It changes that relationship, like you said. And
Yeah.
there is space that at the largest level of the industry for alcohol and tobacco to, okay, we want to maintain our kind of the lifestyle we've become accustomed to, as it were, but our sales are going to decline as the consumer becomes more conscious and other alternatives become available. Yes, we should be invested in that. But if they want that long-term return without having to do all the same dodgy shit they did in the first place to get those riches, they have to partner with the people and recognize that, all right, I'll take this little bit because then the bit that remains ensures that the delivery system, it's beyond just a delivery system. These are social spaces so that
Yeah.
you can go in and I can have a joint out the back because we don't smoke inside. But oh, you can vape over here with dabbing, but not combustibles. But you can then this over there and this over there
Right, fine. We're
and
all
having
compliant with that. We're fine with that. Just give us somewhere. And especially like if you are going to legalize cannabis in a certain state or certain area, give us somewhere to consume safely. There's so many states that will legalize and then be like, but only in your home. And it's like,
with
what? Like,
there are some loopholes. I discovered I did a road trip around America in 2018. I flew into Colorado, rented a car, and like drove around. And I went to go meet Vivian McPeak and speak at Hemp Fest in Seattle. And the first hotel, I went to the first dispensary, and I came and I was like, went to go to the first park behind my hotel, and there's a giant sign saying like this is classed as federal land, and the smoking of cannabis and da 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 federal offense. Da, da, da. I'm like, I won't smoke a joint here. Walked back to me hotel. I kind of like caught the eye of the guy on the desk, and he looked cool. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, all right, bro. How's it going? We had this conversation, and he just kind of said, like, it's $250 if you smoke in the room. And I went, excuse me? He went, it's $250 if you smoke in the room. I went, smoke what? He went, if you smoke in the room. I said, smoke what? He went, smoke in the room. And so the cops are not going to come and knock at my door. It's not going to be like a thing, and it's lawful there are means and ways if you have the money to do so. But if you are your average, just poor resident of an area that then goes to a dispensary, there's also the thing that I found out when I was in California. California's interpretation of like own home is owned home. So you don't have the lawful right, the landlord does. So you could be a good resident, good tenant, and whatever else, go to the dispensary, lawfully buy your cannabis according to what this law should be, lawfully in your own home, or what is defined as in other law, your own home, consume that cannabis and be made homeless.
yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's like what? Like I said, but it's the language they've used of legalize. You
Right.
know, and so we've gone, oh, legalize means all of the things they punished us for are gone. And then we go and try and do them. They're like, oh, no, 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 no. If you give us the money,
Yeah.
though, if you pay a license fee, if you get part of this group, or if you, there's all of these means by which they've found, like you said, to extract the cash all the way down. And by doing it, they're destroying the culture, the motivating factor that we have to come together to create these third spaces. And so they won't go, if
Hmm.
we've destroyed them, the reason for them to want a third space, they don't need third spaces. They can be antisocial and smoke that dirty drug in there. If they want to socialize, they can come and get pissed with the rest of us downtown.
Oh, I know. I think New York City did it right, saying essentially
Mm,
wherever you can smoke a cigarette, you can smoke a joint.
mm.
Great. That's all we're asking for. Like, whenever somebody who smokes cigs tells me that smoking weed smells bad, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you've got, that's insane. Like, yours is literally causing like secondhand carcinogens like into my body, and mine smells like flowers. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
that it's insane.
Yeah, and but again, it's the respectability of it. I've found myself in recent years championing to protect tobacco smokers' rights because I understand that the laws they write don't say tobacco smokers. They say smokers and smoking, and I like to smoke
Mm.
my marijuana, my reefer here. So yeah, it really does. There's so many moving parts to all of this that I think very few of us can grasp, and it's only in a moment you kind of glimpse the scale of it, and the terror sets in, and you go, "I'll go back to my little corner." And
Yeah.
so I can understand how we're so disjointed. I just hope that I don't know, there's something tangible in the air at the minute. I can't help but feel where people are like, we need to do something because the people that we keep putting in place to do something for us don't do shit for us.
Ever.
So
No.
yeah, we've got to figure out our own shit, I think.
A lot of empty promises, at least in the US. So yeah, I do think I've always felt a revolution coming. Like everyone's like, when do you think federal legalization? I'm like, next 5 years for sure. And everyone's like, really? And I'm like, I'm just a chronic optimist. I just think that
I
everything's
love that,
gonna
a
happen in the
chronic
next
optimist.
in the next 5 years.
It's a wonderful phrase. I'm the same. Like we over here in the UK are like, yeah, yeah, 2, 3 years, man, 2, 3 years, and been saying that. I keep finding that fall out of my mouth for the past 10 years.
Yeah, it catches up
So
with.
yeah, I'm aware of time here, but I wanted to do a couple of quick fire questions. If that was all right.
Cool. Yeah.
So this was something actually somebody put to me when I asked, well, when I mentioned, actually no, I wanted to ask you about your book first, then I'll do that question. So obviously you've got a new book coming out in June this year?
June
June.
10th. Yeah,
Awesome. Firstly, is it going to be available internationally? Can I get my hands on one?
it will be. Yes, it's actually right behind me. It's
I've
Reefer
been I've been
Wellness.
noticing it and
Yeah.
trying not to reference it because I knew I wanted to talk about it at the end here.
Yeah,
Oh,
so it will be available internationally, and I think there will be an audiobook eventually available for the book as well.
will you be reading it yourself?
I want to. Yeah, that's my goal. We'll make sure that's kind of a goal of mine too, because honestly, my publisher was also like, you have a really unique voice. I think people want to hear it coming from you. So I think that's part of it too. It's just like I've kind of created like a comfortable environment on my podcast online where we talk about all these kind of sensitive subjects and cannabis. So I think coming from the same voice would be impactful, and it's something I'm passionate about. So yes.
100%, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would agree. You have a there's a South Park episode where one of the kids gets called the guy's voice audible chocolate. And you do a lot of Americans I speak to, no offense to my American friends, can often have a grating effect. I know my voice grates on a lot of people as well, so I know it's
No,
pot,
you have a
pot kettle
great
black
voice
here.
too.
Um, but yes, excellent. Sorry, no, could you tell us what the book is about? Sorry, we were supposed to be asking
Yeah,
that.
no, I'd love to. So it's a book about cannabis from a stoner scientist perspective. As I mentioned before, we have all of this literature about cannabis and cannabinoids and terpenes and all of these amazing chemistry, but it really needs to be in the context of a consumer in order for people to understand it. So there's a lot of cultural aspects, there's a lot of community stories, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't find in peer review, but our community and just people who are consuming cannabis know. So it's really a guide for new consumers or for consumers who want to just learn more about how cannabis interacts with the body, how to lock in on personalized cannabis use, personalized medicine a little bit more, finding a strain that works for you, find a consumption method that works for you. I talk about all the time that I think consumption method matters just as much as the strain of product that you're consuming. Smoke chemistry is completely different than edible chemistry, completely different than vape chemistry, and it produces different effects. So I talk about that a lot. I talk about the different medicinal benefits and how someone might, dose or use different methods of consumption depending on what that, medicine that they're looking for component is. I talk about adverse effects. I talk about pretty much everything from rolling a joint into complex chemistry of aroma is in the book.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. And you've just reminded me of a whole series of comments and questions I wanted to ask you. So I think I'm going to have to invite you on again to come back in the future because I wanted to talk about what you're studying with the unique compounds in smoking. Because our prescription system over here in the UK, we're not allowed to smoke. We're only allowed to vaporize.
How's that working out?
For those that follow the rules, probably not that good. It does obviously have some sort of benefit, but obviously is your work prior to this and this study, I imagine, will be revealing the story is not, oh, well, tobacco smoke is bad, so cannabis smoke
Mm-mm.
is bad, which is the bloody logic I'm bouncing my head off constantly with people.
Oh, it drives me nuts. And you mentioned like a smokeless future. I never see a smokeless future. People are always going to smoke. We started out smoking, we're going to end smoking because it's not just, the spiritual aspect of sharing and smoking and, that component, but the chemistry is completely unique and you don't get that chemistry any other way. So there's really unique cannabinoids that are produced through the combustion process. You have CBE, CBT, CBL, all of these compounds that you're not going to find any other way other than either producing a synthetic product or smoking. So there's a lot of unique medicinal benefits that we get from smoking, and smoking has such a bad reputation, as you're saying, from the tobacco industry. But there really are pretty few adverse effects documented with chronic smokers of cannabis. And we need to pay attention to that data too. Why do 80% of medical patients prefer smoking over other consumption methods? It's a
Mm.
really, really unique feeling, and we do believe it should be studied more. So, yeah, I do speak about the positives of smoking weed quite a bit in the book, and of course, if you're feeling any adverse effects from smoking, I always say to stop smoking. But it's unique chemistry, it's unique pharmacology, and a lot of people really only benefit from smoking weed. So we should be studying that more and using it as an advocacy push, saying, okay, if this is why people prefer it, like, let's look into that more. There's clearly something behind this that millions of people are noticing and feeling from their own bodies.
100%, 100%.
Oh, one more thing about smoking too.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
the coolest consumption method because it's smoking, it's vaping, and it's consuming concentrate at the same time. Because when you're
Mm,
smoking a joint, obviously you have that ember that's, producing that heat, but you're also producing an anaerobic environment. There's not a lot of oxygen when you're actually going through the smoking process. And that warm air that's passing through that flower as you're pulling through that smoke, that's vaporizing some of the compounds in the joint. So you're vaping at the same time you're smoking. And then I'm sure you've noticed if you have a really nice flower, really nice resinous flower, towards the end of the joint, it starts to look really sticky and resy. And that's
mm,
the concentrate. That oil's building up towards the end. So you're also taking in that
mhm.
concentrate component of it. So again, it's like three different consumption methods in one. It's a super unique experience. And we should be listening to the lived experience of cannabis consumers.
100%, 100%. Very articulate, very concise, and I do very appreciate it because it's rather relevant, like I said, to things happening here in the UK. Um, yeah, the other question when I mentioned that you were sort of coming on the podcast, they pointed out something to me that I feel a bit, oh crap, how did I not notice this? Um, my numbers in terms of male versus female guests have become irrationally unbalanced. I don't know quite. It's not been an intentional thing, but they wanted to ask me to ask this question partly so that I would also be like motivated to find more female guests. But it's something that I've struggled with. Is there's not as many women operating in the cannabis space, especially within academia. The person that asked the question basically wanted to know like what can other women do that want to get into the field? What sort of lessons, pitfalls, what advice can you give to them? Because there are a lot of women that I do speak to that they don't feel they have the confidence to step into the space to then step onto a platform like this, but they nevertheless are contributing and are doing great work.
Oh, it is rough. I'm not gonna lie. Like there are challenges being a woman in the cannabis space, but I think something I've noticed over the past few years is women really stick together in the space. And I would first recommend that is like find kind of a network of women, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever it is. And when you go to conferences, like first find them and then kind of network together because they're also going to tell you there's a lot of dirty ass men in the space and they're going to tell you who to stay away from, who's safe, in that way. But, I think one of the things is just being just loud, proud, and just showing that you can compete with any of these dudes, if not better. I think a lot of women are amazing communicators. And also, if we look at like traditional herbalism, we look at traditional medicine, women have always been the healers. Women have always been the place where people gravitate towards for medicinal knowledge. So, kind of using that and using that trust and making sure that you bring in empathy to the place, to the space. A lot of times in male dominated fields, it's all just about these like hard, fast facts. And like we never really care about people's experience, people's healing journey. That's something where I found the most value. And also, again, like building that trust with the community is my audience is 50-50, male and female. Because I do talk about science a lot. And like, I think there's a huge space too for women to talk about some of these subjects that are really highly stigmatized, cannabis and breastfeeding, cannabis and pregnancy, these subjects where if a man talks about it, I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, I don't want to hear from you. Like, that's not your wheelhouse. But I think women, especially collecting data on it, presenting a podcast, talking about that information, women feel a lot safer, listening to other women talk about this from an experience of their own or from their community. So, just being confident and feeling like you belong in circles. You do belong in circles. Even if people like are looking down at you, they're intimidated by you because they know that women are excellent communicators, excellent scientists. So just stand your ground and always show up. Don't be intimidated by any of the men in the industry because a lot of men do respect the women in the industry, but you got to vet them. You really do have to be careful because I've definitely had some weird experiences in the cannabis industry as a woman.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories, and from my experience of just being a man in the world and the things that I've witnessed men do, and I say that as a man, that yeah, I can imagine it's the same as it is everywhere else, unfortunately. I think that's a brilliant advice, and I really sort of appreciate it. And I think the one thing for those dudes that don't get it to understand is men and women are different. It's fundamental sort of reality. Men are often goal orientated, problem solution done. Way pints, celebrate. Hey, women are like, yeah, you've got the solution, but is it the right solution?
Right,
What?
let's think about that
How
a
does
little
a
more.
solution? Yeah, and it's we need that synergy of the groups of the yin and the yang of that, the feminine masculine energy of the men going, we're gonna take over the industry, we're gonna be top and da da da. And yeah, that feminine energy of being like, well, yes, but what we're providing has to have value and meaning. It has to have
Hmm.
something else to it. And some people may hear this conversation and be being, gender bias or whatever else, but I think there's a universal truth there that we're seeing the absence of it within the industry. That it's what I was talking about building that rickety thing that might look like a nice tower, but the foundations aren't there because it's not got all the ingredients. And
Hmm.
so we need to parlay together, I think, not just as the genders, but as all disparate groups.
Yeah, and I
Um,
do love something about the legal industry that I love is as a woman, it definitely isn't always safe purchasing any drug on the black
mm,
market. You have to meet with someone at 9 p.m. in a sketchy parking lot behind the Walmart or whatever it is. Like that's not always safe. Whereas, going to a dispensary that's well lit, that has security, that definitely enhances safety for women. And I think that shouldn't be undermined. Like we're seeing more and more women cannabis consumers because it's finally safe. And especially comparing alcohol to cannabis, oftentimes with alcohol, you're compromising your judgment, your autonomy, your connection with your
mm.
body when you're drinking. And with cannabis, you feel more connected. You feel safer. You feel locked in because you know that you can still drive a vehicle if you have to. You can still like make judgment calls when you need to. So I think that's another huge component of like why we're seeing way more women consumers compared to men, especially in some regions. Because yeah, alcohol is just not always safe for women to consume or in dodgy places.
I've known this, but I've never really thought of how that relates to the economics of the industry before. In terms of, yeah, the reason you would see numbers of an explosion of women consumers is because the dudes have already got connections.
Yeah.
Because I've ran through my head there as maybe once or twice I've met a dealer for whatever substance or whatever part of my life that I've actually gone, oh, I'm worried about the dealer. 99% of the time, I'm worried about the police
Yeah.
or that sort of thing. But then there's only, and even then, it's, yeah, to think that would be the common experience. Would that have changed my relationship with drugs
Mm-hmm.
entirely?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a bit of a revelation there of my male ignorance. But yeah, that's always learned something new on this podcast. Last question is, wait, my new sort of last question. What are we not talking about in the space that we really should be talking about?
Hmm. Well, I think some like more obvious things are just like being able to evaluate quality more than just THC percentage. That's something that we talk about a lot through our nonprofit is just like that number doesn't really matter for quality, but at the same time, do we have any metric for quality? Like, how on earth are consumers supposed to know if they're purchasing a quality product versus not quality product? What goes into producing a quality product? Is it the drying cure? Is it the grow conditions? Is it the nutrients? Whatever that is. So I think that is definitely one component. And I will say overconsumption too. Just like anything, like cannabis
Mm.
can be overconsumed. And especially as an industry and as a community that kind of exists, on the outliers of things, we need to look out for our own peers and our own community because it is possible to use cannabis as exclusively a form of escapism and, develop a really bad relationship with that. And as stoners, as community members, like look out for your friends too and like have tough conversations if you have to about overconsumption and about, not having a good relationship with the plant. And I'm not saying it's going to kill you. It won't kill you. You can survive forever consuming, quote, too much cannabis. But at the same time, like you can have negative aspects of whether your health, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. That's something that we do need to regulate. And because the government isn't really involved in our medicine right now, which is okay, it's just a community medicine. It's a community practice. And there's a lot of therapeutic value. And when you're smoking with your friend and you're sharing a joint, like have conversations, use that as a tool to kind of bridge those tough subjects and, use it not as escapism all the time, but also as, a tool to have those more difficult conversations.
Excellent, excellent. I think it's a wonderful way to end this podcast. I'll simply ask you, where would you like me to direct people? Will be some links below, but what websites, resources would you like to promote?
Yeah, so I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube under the username Cannabichem. That's CANNABICHEM. And then my podcast is called the Bioactive Podcast. You can find that on streaming platforms as well as YouTube. And then if you just Google Reefer Wellness, you'll be able to find where the book is available in your area, whether that's Amazon. I don't know if you guys have Barnes and Noble or even like local bookstores that's available for pre-order. I'm not sure the exact situation in the UK, but I know it will be available in the UK.
Awesome, awesome, excellent. It has been a pleasure, Riley. Thank you very much. I will say goodbye now, and then yeah, we'll pause, have a quick little chat off the record, and then I'll get back in here and finish this thing off. But
Cool.
yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Peace.
It has been. Peace.
Well, there you go, folks. That was Dr. Riley Kirk, PhD. Hope you enjoyed that one. I think we got through the majority of my questions by the looks of it. We touched on most of the topics, very briefly on the smoking versus vaping thing at the end there. We've just had a bit of a conversation in the preamble, and we're going to have her back on in the future, later on in the year, to report on some more of the findings of the study of the unique pharmacology and chemistry found within the smoke of cannabis versus the vaporization of cannabis, which will relate into some other guests that we'll be having on, one quite soon, one later on in the year as well, to try and get down to the bottom of exactly as we discussed there, why millions of people seem to prefer smoking cannabis versus vaporizing it, and maybe to scratch on the potentially conspiratorial element as to why we're not allowed to vape, to smoke our cannabis in the UK when we're prescribed it here, that we are forced into vaping it. But yeah, check her out in the links below. We've been a bit shorter there because I was mindful of Riley's time. So there's a couple of bits of news that I said I wanted to get to, so we will do that. I think I can share my screen from here somewhere, which would be this one. Share that, something like that. There we go. Story in Cannabis Health by Sarah Sinclair, former guest, obviously, here on the podcast. Yeah, interesting incident happened in Belfast. A woman traveling, I believe, to Turkey, I think it says here. Yeah, who'd gone through all proper channels, had communicated with the embassy, had her travel letter, etc., had gone through security, then subsequently got in an issue with the cabin crew and had her cannabis confiscated from her. This is a similar incident to something we discussed previously, which was actually a shameless plug here. This is my own article. So the smell of cannabis grounds, flight over contact high fears. This was the absurd situation that happened in July last year with Drew Gilchrist. Pardon me, the influencer known as Drew is sharing here in the UK, or well, formerly of the UK. I believe he's moved to Thailand recently. Yeah, in which there was a massive incident. Armed police ended up on the flight. I'll include links to these stories below. But I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that Jet2 have issued an apology and are, as you can see here, reviewing their policies. So hopefully this will lead to some standardization of information and education amongst flight attendants and security and people involved within the apparatus of air travel, so that it becomes a bit easier for us. Something else here was, oh god, I hate having used this as a resource. Look at the state of this fucking website, man. Christ, this is with, oh no, I had to take my ad blockers off to read this. Look at the state of this. It's unreadable. Christ. Yeah, private clinics apparently slammed for claiming medical cannabis can be used for ADHD and menopause. From a statement that I don't currently have preloaded here, but I will share below, I think from a Medica CEO whose name escapes me. Is it Jon Robinson? Yeah, he's one of the people that's quoted in this article, but as he said on LinkedIn, he feels that he was massively misquoted. Yeah, it seems to be some quite poor journalism trying to basically suggest that the clinics are upselling cannabis and creating like a for-profit industry and exploiting basically unjustified claims, as I believe that they're sort of stating it to be. They do go through the sort of the usual spiel here. They then, talk about the presence of things that are happening on social media in terms of the way the loophole that people are getting around advertising. So you're getting advertising for the existence of cannabis clinics, not the existence of products. You're then getting patients themselves producing content that is then being shared or used in which they can make claims of how it affects them, but that's not the clinics themselves obviously making those claims, little legal loopholes. There's a lot of there's a lot of crap here that I'm just, it's your usual kind of thing, and it's interesting to see. The reason I wanted to bring this up was that it's interesting to see the Daily Mail, granted it's the Mail Online, but the Mail of all people, having this issue with this system, when this system, to my knowledge and my experience, has been set up to almost placate the paranoia that prohibition has created, that is perpetuated by outlets like this. So I don't know, it feels like, what's that Pokemon meme of, the creature got confused and attacked itself. So I'm interested to see the outcome of this and, who's kind of behind this, what interests are being served. The timing of this seems quite coincidental because obviously this was announced a couple of days ago, 27th of January, the MPs holding a debate on medicinal cannabis. Again, interesting, the language. This is the UK parliamentary website, and they are using the word medicinal, not medical. Again here, debate on medicinal, so it wasn't a typo. I haven't had a chance to digest the video. I've got it somewhere around here. No, it's on a different screen. I've had a chance to sort of have a look at some of the notes. It seems to be the same old bullshit, despite passionate pleas from sort of some MPs. The new Labour government are set in just continuing the status quo of previous governments, not just, the Tories and 15 years of their rule, but like their coalition, as well as previous Labour governments, this kind of move towards true medicalisation of cannabis, as it would seem. The other thing that is new out is legal seizures. The annual data from Home Office has been released, and it shows, as you can see here, that Britain seized over 119 metric tons of illegal drugs. That's a lot of drugs. That's a hell of a lot of drugs. In the year of March, there'll be year 2, March 2024, so from March 2023. Volume of drugs seized by police and border officials rose 52% in 12 months. As you may have well seen, several stories over the year of hundreds of people getting caught either flying back from Thailand, California, other American jurisdictions where cannabis has been, air quotes, legalized, have been getting caught at customs with literally suitcases just full of pounds and kilos of weed. But yeah, these are some record high numbers and are continuing to show a trajectory towards giving evidence towards what we already know, what Vice quips at the end of its videos. The war on drugs has been won, but it has been won by drugs, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I think the current market is a bit fucked, and I think obviously reforms need to be made. That's not what I'm saying. But yeah, these numbers are interesting, and as other territories around the world continue to, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen now. I'll share all these links down below, people, so you can review them. Yeah, as this information starts to become more available, it's evidence towards. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. As I was saying, as more territories around the world move towards legalizing drugs, to normalizing creating trades, whether they be medicinal, medical, recreational, whatever form they want to take, that creates more drugs, that creates more interest in drug users. What these institutions, what the authorities, what our governments seem to fail to understand is when we're on our little Black Mirror boxes, we're not respecting boundaries or laws. The global experience of the collective homogenized culture it doesn't respect boundaries. It doesn't acknowledge them. So to a lot of us, drugs are legal, not in the sense that the law has changed or there's legislation protecting us, but in the sense that we don't care that they're they're criminalized. We know that there's consequences of getting caught. We know there's consequences to society and to the masses, whether they be drug takers or not drug takers, from the wasted resource of the draconian actions of prohibition, of the war on drugs. We know we could have a much better reality, as we discussed with our guest today, with Riley. We have to wake up to the reality of what is happening. Otherwise, things will just get worse. There are some bad people involved in this space. There are some wonderful people involved in this space. But until we get meaningful legislative changes, we're all considered criminals in their eyes. So the way we make a better society, the way we make a better culture, is to work together to find the people that want to make a difference and sit together and talk and figure out how the fuck we make that difference. Because I don't have the answers, you don't have the answers, but we get enough of us together, maybe we can start to find them, discover them together. So yeah, there's my roundup of some news. There's something else, but there's too many words written on these pages in front of me, and I can't figure out exactly what it was that I wanted to reference. So yeah, that'll probably come up in next week's podcast, which is some incentive for you to stick around. But yeah, if you've really enjoyed this, please do give us a like, a share, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever it is you do on your platform. Show appreciation. I appreciate it and appreciate you. Yeah, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, all that jazz, at The Simpa Life. Check out simpalife.com for old articles and various resources. If you really enjoyed this, check us out on patreon.com/The Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. And yeah, we will be back next week with, I don't know, somebody. Be awesome. You love it. I love it. All right, take it easy. Peace and love, folks.